Sagittarius, you are entering the most important week of the year. Watch for the signs before it's too late. Have you been sensing it? That subtle hum beneath the surface of your daily life, the flicker in your gut, the pulse of anticipation that something bigger is coming, even if you can't explain why. It's not your imagination. You're standing at the threshold of a week that carries divine weight, and your soul knows it before your mind can name it. You may feel restless, slightly off-center, or strangely emotional. Conversations might take on a deeper tone, dreams more vivid than usual. Small moments suddenly feel symbolic. These aren't coincidences, they're cosmic whispers, and they're pointing to something that has the power to realign your entire path. This first week of June isn't ordinary. For you, Sagittarius, it's an activation, a test, a gift. The universe is inviting you to see what's been hidden, to rise where you've hesitated, to trust in the direction of your soul when logic starts to wobble. What's ahead will not only shift how you see your career and relationships, it may reshape how you see yourself. And that's why you're here now, not by accident, but because your higher self brought you to this message for a reason. So take a breath, soften your heart, and stay with me. Together we'll walk through the signs, the challenges, the blessings, and the transformation that awaits. If you feel this already stirring within, share, and subscribe to Zodiac Wisdom. The journey is just beginning. Gate 1, the test before the rise. Recognition is already happening. Sagittarius, you were born to search for meaning, to follow truth beyond borders, and to speak from a place that few dare to reach. And this week, this very moment, you are being watched not by chance but by divine design. There's something unfolding around you that isn't obvious to the naked eye, but is felt deeply by the soul. You may not have the full story yet, but the atmosphere is shifting. You're being observed, measured, weighed, not in judgment, but in preparation for what is already seeking you. Lately, you may have noticed the smallest things feel heightened. You walk into a room and sense the mood before anyone speaks. A compliment lands in your inbox, seemingly random, but lingers in your heart because it touches the exact part of you that had begun to question its worth. Maybe your boss called you out in a meeting, not for correction, but for something you did well weeks ago that you'd already forgotten. Or maybe someone you haven't heard from in years reaches out just to say, "You've been on my mind." These are not small things. They are part of a cosmic orchestration happening around you. The universe is sending people to reflect something back to you. A deeper value, an unseen potential, a vibration you've outgrown. There's a reason why, in the past week, you've been feeling on edge in conversations you used to tolerate. The tasks you once did on autopilot now feel dull, misaligned, almost hollow. You're not becoming lazy or unfocused. You're being redirected. When your soul is on the verge of a breakthrough, your body and mind begin to rebel against what is no longer meant for you. That resistance you feel, that tension in your chest when doing what used to feel fine, that's not frustration. It's evolution knocking. You are being called higher. And that calling doesn't arrive with fanfare. It shows up as pressure, subtle at first, like a tightening around your daily habits, then louder, as external events begin to mirror the inner chaos you've been ignoring. A miscommunication with a colleague, a project that suddenly falls through, a promise that someone breaks without explanation. All of it has one purpose, to reveal where your energy no longer belongs. But here's the deeper truth. What looks like things falling apart is actually the moment before something much greater aligns. I once worked with a Sagittarius woman named Clara. She had been in a stable marketing job for 5 years, loyal to the point of self-erasure. She did her work quietly, rarely asked for anything, and carried the weight of her team when no one else did. For years she assumed no one noticed. But in the first week of June last year, she began waking up with a strange urgency, as if something was coming but she didn't know what. On Monday, her manager unexpectedly invited her to a strategy meeting she'd never been included in. On Tuesday, a mentor she admired emailed her a job posting that seemed oddly tailored to her strengths. By Friday, Clara had 2 offers in her inbox and a decision to make. Not between jobs, but between continuing to play small or finally acknowledging her worth. The universe hadn't forgotten her. It had been preparing her in silence. This week, Sagittarius, is your version of Clara's week. The signs will not always shout. Some will whisper through hesitation. Some will arrive through contrast by showing you what you don't want so you can clarify what you do. A delayed payment, a coworker who suddenly starts copying your ideas, a compliment wrapped in passive aggression. Pay attention, not to the drama but to the data. What are these experiences teaching you about how you are seen, and more importantly, how you are meant to be seen? Recognition isn't always applause. Sometimes it's a door that opens quietly in the background and waits to see if you notice it. This is not the week to doubt yourself. This is the week to show up, not louder but clearer. The people who matter are already sensing your shift, even if they don't have words for it yet. They see the way your presence steadies the room. They feel the precision in your intuition. They sense that you're not just another voice at the table. You're becoming the one who moves the table. But understand this. Being recognized is only the beginning. The true test comes next. The universe wants to see what you'll do with that recognition. Will you shrink from it, telling yourself you're not ready? Will you deflect it, claiming others deserve it more? Or will you receive it like a soul who knows they were born not just to seek wisdom but to embody it? Your fire, Sagittarius, is not meant to be hidden under logic or humility. It's meant to guide, to challenge, to ignite the next level of collective consciousness. And right now you are being given the opportunity to rise, not in a dramatic leap, but in grounded soul-led alignment. Don't be surprised if an opportunity comes this week that seems too sudden, too bold, too off-script for your usual path. That's how the divine tests readiness, by offering what you secretly asked for, in a package that challenges your comfort zone. Let me be clear. This week is not about perfection. It's about presence. When the email comes, read between the lines. When the call arrives, listen with your soul. When the opportunity shows up disguised as inconvenience, say yes, even if your hands shake. Especially if your hands shake. You are being recognized in ways your past self could never have imagined, not just for your skills or effort, but for your vibration, for the energy you carry when you walk into a space, the light you bring when you speak truth without pretense. And while others might think it all came out of nowhere, you'll know better. You'll know it was built through every silent act of integrity, every boundary you held when it would have been easier to bend, every time you listened to your gut when logic screamed louder. This is the week the universe moves the spotlight. But the question is not whether you will be seen. It's whether you will stand still enough to be fully witnessed. Gate 2, letting go with grace. The sacred power of necessary endings. Sagittarius, you are the archer of the zodiac, always aiming your arrow toward the next horizon, the next answer, the next awakening. But what if I told you that this week, the most powerful movement you can make is not outward but inward? Not through seeking but through surrender? Letting go is never easy for someone who believes in possibilities the way you do. You've always been able to hold on to hope longer than most. You see potential in places others have already abandoned. You wait for the best in people. You believe that with time, effort, and a little more patience things can shift. And that is your gift but also your wound. Right now you're being asked to end something. A chapter. Connection. A cycle of waiting that no longer serves your becoming. And this ending may not come with thunder or fireworks. In fact, it may feel like a soft but relentless ache in your chest. A knowing that's been growing in the background. A silence that's lasted too long. A door you keep knocking on even though no one opens it anymore. Maybe it's a friendship that once lit you up but now only drains you. The conversations feel forced. The laughter less frequent. You keep showing up out of loyalty, out of history, out of guilt. But each time you leave you feel emptier, not fuller. That's not alignment. That's clinging. Or perhaps it's a role in your career that once made you feel alive, purposeful, important. You fought to get there. You proved yourself time and again. But now every morning you wake up and your spirit feels heavy. You open your inbox and sigh before you even begin. Your body knows before your mind is ready to accept it. What once was sacred is now expired. And holding on isn't noble, it's numbing. I once guided a Sagittarius man named Theo through this exact moment. He was a teacher, beloved by his students, respected by his peers, deeply committed to his mission. But after 12 years in the same classroom, something in him started to shift. He no longer felt excited to prepare lessons. He began avoiding certain conversations. He brushed it off as burnout until one morning he forgot to bring his favorite book to class, the one he always carried like a ritual. And when he reached into his bag and found it missing, he didn't feel panic. He felt relief. It was as if some invisible thread had loosened inside him, as if his soul had whispered, "You're done here." That week, Theo made the hardest decision of his life, to resign without a clear plan. Not out of rebellion but out of reverence. He needed to make space before knowing what would come next. And within 3 months, he was leading a global online platform teaching spiritual education. Something he never imagined was possible. Sagittarius, you are at your own missing book moment. The thing you've been holding is losing weight not because it no longer matters but because it has served its purpose. Its lesson is complete, and continuing to carry it will only slow you down for the journey ahead. But to let go, you must honor what it gave you. This is not abandonment. This is sacred closure. Do not rush it. Do not burn the bridge to prove you're strong. Just step away with grace, with softness, with the quiet courage that says, "Thank you. I'm ready now." You may cry. You may second guess. You may feel the temptation to run back to what's familiar. But stay present. Let the discomfort shape you. This is how growth feels in real time, not romantic but raw. And if you're still unsure whether it's really time to let go, ask yourself this. When you imagine holding on for another year, does it make your heart expand or contract? If it contracts, that's your answer. This week, the endings may come as external events. A project canceled without notice, someone ghosting you, a plan falling apart at the last minute. It may hurt. It may feel unfair. But beneath the chaos is alignment. The soul removes what you no longer have the strength to release on your own. Other endings may be internal. A shift in desire. A fading interest in something that once defined you. You might outgrow a label you've worn for years. And that can feel like an identity crisis. But what if it's a soul realignment instead? What if this isn't the end of you, but the beginning of the version of you who's finally free to live without proving? Sagittarius, you don't need to explain your ending to anyone. Not everyone will understand why you're walking away. Some may accuse you of giving up. Others will project their own fear of change onto you. But that's not your burden. Your only responsibility is to your own alignment, to your inner truth, to the part of you that has been whispering for months, "We can't stay here." And when the grief comes, and it will, let it wash through you. Don't suppress it. Don't distract yourself with busyness. Grief is not a weakness. It is the proof that you loved deeply, tried wholeheartedly, and invested your soul where it once belonged. But now that energy is returning to you, and it's time to reinvest it somewhere new, somewhere aligned, somewhere sacred. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means forgiving the version of you who stayed too long. It means celebrating the wisdom you gained, even if it came through pain. And most of all, it means trusting that life is not taking something from you. It's clearing space for what's next. This week, you may feel like the floor beneath you is shifting. That's okay. Let it shift. You were never meant to build a life on foundations that keep you small. You were meant to soar. And before you fly higher, you must release the weights you've mistaken for wings. So breathe. Cry if you need to. Write a goodbye letter and burn it. Walk to your favorite place and whisper, "I release this with love." Whatever ritual you choose, make it sacred. Make it yours. Because you are not just ending something. You are graduating from a version of your life that no longer fits the shape of your becoming. The endings this week may hurt, but they are holy. Let them do what they came to do. Gate 3, the soul mirror. A deeper love is calling. Sagittarius, you've always been a seeker. But behind every quest, every far-off journey, every philosophy you chase, there is a longing not just to understand the world, but to be understood within it. And though your spirit often points you toward freedom, autonomy, and motion, there's a quieter yearning inside you that you don't always speak of. A longing for love, not just any love, but the kind that sees straight through to your soul and says, "I recognize you. You are safe here." This is not about romance in the conventional sense. This is about connection in its purest form. And this week, something is shifting in your emotional field. A space is opening for love to enter. Not as a distraction, not as an attachment, but as an activation. You may start to notice dreams that feel more vivid than usual, starring a person you can't name but who feels achingly familiar, or a chance encounter that leaves your heart racing, not from desire, but from recognition. Perhaps someone you thought was part of your past begins to appear again. Not physically but energetically, through sudden memories, songs, scents, or phrases that echo from their soul to yours. These are not accidents. These are soul nudges. Love, real love, does not arrive to complete you. It arrives to reflect you, to hold a mirror to the parts you've forgotten, hidden, or buried beneath layers of logic and independence. And Sagittarius, while you often say you don't need anyone to feel whole, and in many ways you don't, there's still a sacred truth here. You were not meant to walk every path alone. You may be entering what we call a divine mirror phase, a time when someone shows up in your life to reveal something back to you, something dormant but vital. It may come as a soulmate, a deep friend, a spiritual partner, or even someone who seems like an emotional trigger at first. But their role is not to disrupt you. It's to awaken you. Let me tell you about Mara, a Sagittarius woman I once worked with. She had always prided herself on independence, built a life on her own terms, traveled the world, started a business, held strong boundaries in love. She told me she didn't believe in soulmates, just partners who chose each other over time. But then during a retreat in Bali, she met someone. A man from a different country, a different culture, a different rhythm. The connection was instant but not wild. It was deep, serene, inexplicably familiar. He asked questions no one had ever dared. He listened not just to her words, but to the silences between them. He didn't need to possess her. He simply saw her. It was like he was reading a book I didn't know I had written, she told me. Mara didn't move in with him. She didn't marry him. But that man awakened a version of her that had gone quiet, the version that still believed in intimacy without fear, in presence without performance. And from that point on, every relationship she entered was more conscious, more sacred, because she had remembered her depth. Sagittarius, this week you may encounter someone who holds that kind of mirror. Don't rush to define it. Don't try to cage it with labels like relationship or fate. Just feel it. Let it unfold. The soul does not move in linear time. It remembers people across lifetimes, across timelines. And sometimes it's not about how long someone stays, but how deeply they reach. If you're already in a relationship, this week may trigger a new layer of connection or an honest confrontation. You might find yourself craving more emotional presence, more spiritual intimacy, more truth. That's not a sign something's wrong. It's a sign your heart is expanding. Invite your partner into that space, not with pressure but with vulnerability. Share your longing, your visions, your fears. Let them see the sacred parts of you that aren't always articulate, but are always real. And if you are single, don't let society's timelines define your worth. Being alone does not mean you are unloved. Sometimes it means you are being protected while your soul prepares to meet a love that matches your vibration. This week, you may feel the urge to romanticize the past or question if you missed your chance. Don't go down that road. You are never late for love. You are right on time, for a love that is finally worthy of you. You may also notice synchronicities that hint at love's presence. A stranger who says exactly what you needed to hear. A friend who suddenly confesses they've seen your pain, even when you hid it. A book that falls open to a quote about soul connection. These are the breadcrumbs on the trail. Follow them, not with desperation but with curiosity. Your heart, Sagittarius, is not a puzzle to be solved. It is a universe to be explored. And this week, the stars are aligning to remind you of one simple truth. You are not too much, and you have never been not enough. The right soul will meet you where you are and still invite you higher. This is the moment to soften, to allow, to believe again. Not just in love but in your lovability. That someone could witness the way your eyes light up when you talk about freedom, the way your silence holds entire galaxies, and the way your truth is always laced with hope, and still want to stay. Open the door, Sagittarius. You don't have to go searching. Just be still long enough for love to find you. Gate for the sacred unknown. Trusting the void before the dawn. Sagittarius, what do you do when the map you followed your whole life suddenly fades? When the road ahead is covered in fog, and your compass no longer points in any clear direction. For someone like you, whose very nature is wired to explore, to know, to pursue truth, this moment can feel like betrayal. You've lived a life defined by forward motion, but now everything around you asks for stillness, for surrender, for faith. You are entering the sacred territory of the void, a space that terrifies the logical mind but speaks directly to the soul. The void is not emptiness. It is not failure. It is divine incubation, the time between stories, the breath between lifetimes. And right now it's exactly where your spirit needs to be. If you've been feeling lost, numb, uninspired, if the things that once made sense now seem shallow, don't panic. You are not breaking. You are being broken open. This week is not meant to give you answers. It's meant to undo you, to pull the last threads of false certainty from your hands so that you can receive something much more precious. Trust in the unknown. I remember working with a Sagittarius woman named Ira, who came to me in the midst of this very season. She had just ended a long-term engagement, walked away from a six-figure job, and moved across the country with nothing but a backpack and a notebook full of dreams. I thought I'd feel free, she told me, but instead I feel completely undone. Like I stepped off a cliff and there's no ground beneath me. I smiled gently because I knew. There is no ground, I said. There is only grace. And it will catch you once you stop trying to land. Ira spent the next few months doing nothing impressive by the world's standards. She meditated. She walked. She cried often and laughed randomly. She sat in the sun without a goal. And in that space of stillness, she heard something she hadn't heard in years, herself. Her soul began to speak in the silence. And when it finally did, it didn't say, "Go back to who you were." It said, "Welcome home. Sagittarius, you are being called into your own sacred silence now. You may feel misunderstood, out of place, emotionally raw. But that rawness is your initiation. This is what spiritual awakening feels like. Not a beam of light from the heavens, but a subtle, disorienting unraveling that leaves you humble enough to hear truth for the first time. It's okay if you don't know who you are anymore. It's okay if you don't recognize your desires, your ambitions, or your timeline. That confusion is holy. That identity crisis is sacred. Because only in shedding the false self can the soul begin to breathe. You may find yourself withdrawing from people who once lit you up. You may stop finding meaning in old conversations, old pleasures, old goals. This isn't depression. It's discernment. Your soul is editing your life to make room for alignment. And it's okay to grieve what must fall away, even if you outgrew it. Sometimes growth feels like isolation before it becomes liberation. This week, try not to force clarity. Don't rush to fill the silence. Don't numb the uncertainty with busyness. Just be. Sit with yourself in honesty. Ask your heart what it needs, not what it fears. Journal the questions that haunt you, not to solve them but to honor them. Wander without purpose. Create without needing perfection. Let the mystery do its quiet work. Because here's what I know. When a Sagittarius embraces the unknown, something miraculous happens. You begin to alchemize fear into wonder, doubt into devotion, restlessness into presence. You realize that not every arrow needs to fly. Some need to be held close to feel your heartbeat before they find their true direction. And slowly, without warning or design, a flicker of light will appear. A whisper of clarity, a moment of peace that wasn't there before. Not because you fought for it, but because you trusted long enough to receive it. The void is not the end, Sagittarius. It is the beginning of your becoming. You are not being punished. You are being refined, remade, returned to yourself. So breathe. Let the fog stay as long as it wants. Let the silence stretch. Let yourself be empty, because in that emptiness the divine will pour something new, something holy, something truer than you've ever known. And when the path does reappear, when your next quest calls your name, you will walk it with the kind of wisdom only the void can teach. Not just as a seeker, but as a sage. Conclusion: your destiny rises in silence. Sagittarius, if you've walked with me this far, then you already know. This isn't just another horoscope. It's a sacred invitation. A soul whisper reminding you of what you've always known deep down. You were never meant to live an ordinary life. This week, your journey has not been linear. You've passed through fire and fog, memory and longing, silence and surrender. You've stood at the edge of your career and questioned its meaning. You've looked back at what you've lost, not with regret but with reverence. You've opened your heart to love, not to be completed but to be awakened. And you've stood still in the dark, long enough for grace to find you. All of it has been preparing you for something greater, not louder but deeper. Not external recognition but internal clarity. You are not the same soul who began this week, and the stars know it. So now, dear Sagittarius, trust that what you've released has cleared space for what's coming. Let the next step come in its own time. Stay open, stay sovereign, stay tender. Let your intuition lead even when logic lags behind. You are not late. You are in divine timing. And if this message resonated with your spirit, take a moment to share it. Comment your favorite insight, or simply say, I'm ready. Subscribe to Zodiac Wisdom, and let's walk this journey together, one soul-aligned step at a time. The stars are watching, the universe is listening, and your destiny? It's unfolding right on time.